This is the 23 best books of 2023. This year I've consumed over 250 books, DNF'd almost 100 books, and approximately half of those books were published in the year of 2023. I think overall 2023 was a pretty good bookish year, especially if you were an Irish author. And to reflect that, there's 7 of them on this list, which is where we're starting. Juno Loves Legs, Karl Geary. Set in a housing estate in 1980s Dublin, this is a coming of age novel that really focuses on some of the grittier aspects of life. Falling out with your family, violence, poverty, alcoholism, homelessness, sexuality. But through it all, there is this enduring friendship between Juno and Legs, which provides hope and the love to offset all the struggling, but also to contrast that and to help highlight just how horrible things are. This novel has excellent character works in a novel that is exploring pure and simple love between two people in a horrible world that is set up to chew them out and forget this. Read this book if you were a fan of Shuggie Bain. Brainwyrm by Allison Rumfitt. This is the wild card entry on the list. Upon finishing this book, my reaction was, what the fuck did I just read? And to be honest, that's largely still what I think of this book. In this video, I intend to compare the books mentioned to other similar books, but that is just impossible for this book. It is so unique. Anybody rating this novel anything other than 1 star or 5 stars is a liar. Reading this, you will feel emotions. A lot of those emotions will be discussed, but you will feel a lot of them. This is not a book for a lot of people, but this is a novel that captures just how disgusting transphobia is in a very visceral and stomach-churning way that is only possible in the most extreme of literary horror novels. This book comes with trigger warnings at the beginning, and then again halfway through the novel with a recommendation of having an intermission. I've never seen an author intentionally put that within the text of their book, and I don't think this is a gimmick. I only wish that I took those warnings with a little bit more solemnity than I did. It is narrated by a cis woman at some point in the future when identifying as trans is too dangerous due to government policies. Frankie works for a large social media company, censoring, banning and warning users, all the while consuming the most extreme and or hateful posts. One day her work is bombed by a transphobic woman. To cope with this, she decides to go out and binge drink and have sex with some random strangers, and that's where she meets Vanya, submissive and sexy Vanya, and the two hit it off instantly and form a relationship. Vanya introduces Frankie to their boyfriend, and this leads to a kaleidoscopic experience that blends political terrorism and transgenocide with something out of a tacky alien horror movie and the most extreme sex scenes you will have ever read. I cannot express just how extreme these scenes are. Do not read them if you are in any doubt or even if you have a stomachache. But if you can withstand them, it is such an effective allegory for something so mean-spirited. It must have been a radically compassionate exercise writing this novel. Rumfitt has tailored your emotional response to the situations in this novel to be the same responses that transphobic people have towards trans people, which is nothing short of amazing to be put in those hateful shoes and to feel that disgust. A lot of characters in this novel are stand-ins for famous people, and I didn't get all the references myself, but I did get the obvious popular children's author in there. Mega content warning with this one. And now on to something a little bit lighter. It's Wayward by Amelia Hart. I'm not sure I should be calling this book lighter considering the subject matter, but it is. 3 women in 3 different timelines all find themselves somehow outsided or victimized by their situation. A woman is accused of being a witch for setting a farmer's animals against him. A teenager is pushed into a relationship with her cousin despite not being entirely sure about it, and a woman is the victim of an overly possessive and violent partner. These women are all in different times and we jump between the 3 of them. One of the things that I think is really effective is that the different times make the changes in perspective really easy to follow. You are never confused by the writing in this novel. This is a book about feminism, control and the fear of female agency, all wrapped up up in 3 very strong plots with 3 very well-built protagonists. This is one of these novels that has been very popular, but has also struggled to mark itself to the correct reader. It sits at that more literary side of commercial fiction, or that more commercial side of literary fiction. It has a fantasy element to it, but it's not really a fantasy book. I think it should be marketed to readers of historical fiction. Not only are 2/3 of the storylines in the novel historical fiction, but I think fans of historical fiction are used to not being sure if their book is technically commercial or literary. They're used to reading that in-between category, and probably acknowledging that those labels are pretty ill-defined and fuzzy anyway. I saw Charlotte Malloy compare this to Evie Wyld's The Bass Rock, and I don't think that anybody can come up with a better comparison, although I do think that Wayward is the better novel. The New Life by Tom Crewe. This is a historical fiction set in 1890s England involving 2 men that were writing a book about sexual inverts. This is based on a real-life book and real-life figures, although the book has taken many liberties and changed facts in order to help with the storytelling. There are a few things I really love in this novel. A lot of the early accounts of gay rights and being gay erase women, both lesbians and the women that are married to these men. And I thought that the book was such a wonderful demonstration of how women could be damaged by the anti-invert attitudes of the time. The use of the Oscar Wilde trial really demonstrates the tension and what this book could do to the career of those men writing the book. It is something I was passingly familiar with in that I knew that it happened, but that was about it. I found the way Tom Crewe treated this was really empathetic and helped transport me into the mind of a queer person living in the 1890s, seeing the trial take place, fearing that societal change and what that will mean to their life. If you're a fan of Alice Wynn's In Memoriam, this is a good one for you. The Secret Diary of Charles Ignatius Sancho by Patterson Joseph. This is a real Dickensian feeling novel. It's about the life of the first black man to vote in Britain, starting when he was young and finishing with the vote. Joseph is able to both pay tribute to Britain's literary past and ensure that black British children have a hero in historical novels to read about. And he's done it all in a humorous and entertaining novel. In an interview with Mallory Blackman, Joseph talks about all the research he put into creating this book and finding out about Ignatius Sancho's life. And I note that a lot of times historical fiction authors get bogged down in retelling the facts as they were. And Joseph notes in that interview that his primary goal is to entertain, so he doesn't bog us down with countless stories that don't add to the plot. Also, there are large gaps in what we know about Ignatius Sancho. My favourite aspect of this novel is the point when Sancho owns a shop and he has to sell sugar and coffee, knowing where they come from, knowing it's the product of slavery. It's part of creating this realistic but also flawed hero. And, just by the way, if you think that doesn't seem right, check where the sugar and coffee you have comes from today. You'll find a lot of companies, especially the very large ones, still have slavery in their supply chain, which is why fair trade is so important and you should boycott Nestle, although Nestle is not acting alone. What I love about this complex depiction of Sancho is that he is really 3D. But because this novel is written in the style of Dickens, there are these very two-dimensional villains that are exaggerated and manage to bring both suspense and comedy to the novel. I think if you like Dickens or Demon Copperhead, then this might be a good one for you. Evil Eye by Eraf Rum. Firstly, just a point of clarity, the last time I spoke about this book, I got myself muddled and I said that Rum was Lebanese when she is in fact Palestinian, which is a massive error, especially considering what is happening at the moment. So I want to apologise to anybody that upset. If you like Rum's first novel, A Woman Is No Man, then this is a book for you. A lot of the same themes are going on, although some of the themes such as domestic violence are not as central, while other themes such as workplace discrimination and mental health take its place. Yara is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, a teaching assistant at a college, which she balances with being a mother, cooking and running the house. She is facing pressure from her mother-in-law to quit her job and look after her family full-time, to be a real wife, something she very much doesn't want to do because her job is all that she has of her own. Her husband is a really strange mix of liberal and traditional in a way that actually makes complete sense. Their marriage was arranged, they are in love. He seems like a nice man who is trying his best, but at the same time he's not listening to Yara, not considering her, and resents her asking for things because he's trying his hardest. He doesn't rule with an iron fist, but he expects to get everything he wants. He just hasn't realised that he isn't negotiating. He feels like he works hard and provides and he's doing his part, but he hasn't asked Yara what she wants from the relationship. I really like the dynamic that Rum has built here, because a lot of novels about bad relationships are really bad, but this just demonstrates how a relationship cannot work. While Yara is definitely worse off, I think the traditional way their relationship is mean that both partners are losers. At the counselling sessions, Yara begins to explore her memory of her parents' relationship that provides a counterpoint to Yara's own relationship. Ultimately, Rum is an author with a rare talent who can create realistic situations and see the tension in them, empathise with her characters, and express it all effectively. Solar Sailor by Claire Kilroy. This is just a powerful letter or an internal monologue from mother to newborn son. It really captures the confusing mess of emotions that motherhood is: exhaustion, love, joy, fear, stress, and even resentment, dislike, and what I think might be postpartum depression, but comes across as the result of a sleep deprivation torture regime that the Geneva Convention would pass laws against. The fear of what the child might grow up to become, the loss of identity, the growth of a new identity, the dislike of other parents, the stress of living up to other parents who seem so perfect, and the importance of having somebody else to be friends with, another parent. These are just some of the themes. This is one topic done deeply, done completely, and done fantastically. I really could feel the emotion our mother was feeling in this book. Fantastic writing. I think we've seen recently books like Night Bitch, The School of Good Mothers, The Nursery, attempt to write a book like this, and they're all okay, but Kilroy has really stripped back those books, made them so much simpler, and given herself room to expand into be so much more complex. And the comparison to those three books doesn't feel right, but it really points out to me just how much better Kilroy is at writing than the other authors. Julia by Sandra Newman. This is a retelling of the classic Orwell novel 1984 from the point of view of Julia. If you're planning on reading this one, you don't need to read 1984, but your enjoyment of this book will be so much richer if you are familiar with it. I would recommend rereading it. Newman manages to both be faithful to the original text and at the same time add so much to the world that Orwell created. Orwell gave us a very male-focused narrative, mostly because his protagonist was a male. And no disrespect to 1984 when I say this, but it is a rather simple novel, intentionally simple novel. By changing the point of view, Newman is able to discuss women's issues such as birth control, abortion, sexuality, both guilt around sexuality and sexual orientation. In Orwell's novel, Julia seems so worldly and street smart, but Winston dismisses her as stupid for her political views. One of my favourite bits of this novel is Julia responding to that. The scene sort of sums up the beauty of this book. It shows us how different perspectives can completely change a novel, while at the same time being completely faithful to the original text. Newman has also decided to extend this novel beyond the end point of 1984. I was really worried when she did this, but not only does it allow Newman to create something completely new, it also allows her to comment on something. It turns this novel into a real conversation with Orwell's novel, particularly the very, very final scene of this book, which is so intelligent and so much the icing on the cake of this great novel. I read this book as part of my Patreon's book club, which is a great point in this video to thank my wonderful Patreons. I think my patrons could be surprised to see this book make the list, because when we discussed it, it was the day after I finished it. And I said I liked it, but it took me a while to get into it. It was a very 4-star experience for me, but this novel has really stayed with me since finishing it. I've not been able to stop thinking about it, and it has really improved in my mind. This is a really good one for Orwell fans, especially I would say if you're not a recent convert to Orwell. The Wren by Anne Enright. Alternating between the narratives of mother and daughter, Carmel and Nell, Carmel is the daughter of a famous poet who left his ill wife to focus on his writing career, and his poetry occasionally jumps in between the two narratives. Nell is Carmel's daughter. This novel is about intergenerational trauma, the impact this selfish man had upon his daughter, and how that impact affected the next generation. The relationship with Carmel and Nell is so full of love, but not always trust. Things are hidden. There are points when you believe the characters actively dislike one another. Then we have this really complex relationship between Carmel and her father, and how there's still love there despite the trauma that also exists. And that captures what I think is a realistic and complex family relationship so well. If the primary reason you read is for characters and relationships, this novel is for you. A truly insightful description of a dysfunctional family. Enright is dark, funny, and super intelligent. This book is one of those novels that is ridiculously feminist without trying to be, just because it centers two women and their experiences. Similarly, because trauma is such a big theme, there's themes of depression and mental health within this too. Beautifully written, the narrative can be a little bit jumpy and loose, and I think in the hands of a lesser author, this would have been a mess, but Enright has produced such a wonderfully thoughtful novel about 3 generations of this one family. I think this is a really good book for fans of Ruth Ozaki's A Tale for the Time Being. Your Driver is Waiting by Priya Guns. This is a novel about Damini, a gay brown rideshare driver who is progressively earning less and less, and since her father passed away, has to earn enough money to support her mother, who is depressed to the point of not functioning. Priya Guns really captures some of the thought processes that are involved when you don't have enough money to pay all your bills. Well, I can have the chocolate bar and not have enough money to pay rent, or I can not have the chocolate bar and still not have enough money to pay rent. I guess I'll have the chocolate bar then. Every part of Damini's life is becoming more and more expensive, and she's progressively earning less and less. One day she meets a hot, rich white ally, and the two hit it off. However, Damini is a bit self-conscious. She's never had sex with a white girl before, while the white girl is maybe not as woke as she thinks she is. Satire is such a hard genre to pull off successfully. To be honest, most satires are rubbish, but it is books like this that get me coming back to that genre again and again. While this book is wonderful, Guns is probably responsible for rereading another dozen terrible satires in the hopes of finding another one this good. This book is constantly funny. It assumes you're smart enough to understand the jokes, and if you don't understand them, don't stress out. There's another one on the way soon. It's socialist, feminist, queer positive, person of colour positive, disabled positive, and it deals with grief. Ultimately, it has an excellent point about performative allyship from people who are advantaged by an oppressive system. This is a much more refined and successful version of a novel like Pizza Girl. Why are we here? Bronnie Doyle. Bronnie Doyle is such a talented Aussie author. I don't think she's made it internationally, but she is so good. I really encourage my international viewers to try and get your hands on any of her books. Bebe moves to her childhood suburb after the sudden death of her partner and the not so sudden death of her father in quick succession. How is she meant to deal with the loss of her father when the person who is meant to comfort her through this loss is not there either? In an attempt to rediscover herself, Bebe is going to party like it's 1999 in the suburb of Bboa Beach, and is mistaken for a dog walker and decides to embrace the new career, only to have a local dog trainer label her as scab labour and a pandemic force everybody into lockdown. Bebe has a traumatic experience with a power-hungry, disbelieving cop. She finds the man that she is bonking is trapped in Switzerland due to the pandemic, shacks up with a woman, and is constantly remembering what her home suburb was like and reflecting on how that has changed. Doyle has written a really layered novel. She is superficially talking about life after loss and grief. Then she is showing how current life can get in the way of that. She is very socially critical of power structures and how they don't deal with the human issues that they're intended for. She's got a real thing for peas. The police, the way we deal with poverty, the prison system, the pandemic are all subjects of criticism. BB is trying to rediscover herself in Bboa Bay. Doyle is including a nice hint that the whole thing is allegorical. Bboa Bay, BB. This is just the type of complex novel I love, where there is something really simple to follow, and then there are all different layers of meaning that keep your head spinning and thinking of new and different things and interpreting this novel again and again. And it all comes back to the central issues of this book. What an amazingly strong central character, and what beautiful poetic writing. This is a good one for fans of A Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Olszewski. Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. I've just gone from the more literary side of my taste to the more commercial side. This is a literary thriller. I think it's the perfect gateway novel for thriller readers that would like to get into literary fiction. It's a novel where the characters pop. When her father expires, Sally Diamond takes him out with the trash. It's what he's always said she should do with his body. She was only following his wishes. Why is everybody so upset? As the police and media become interested in Sally, Sally's terrifying childhood begins to be revealed. Then the messages from a stranger begin. 40-year-old Sally is forced to step into the world for the first time in her memory, make new friends, and find the independence that she has never had. This is such a wonderfully intelligent psychological study or psychological thriller. I love how Sally is presented, and you assume initially that she is on the spectrum, but then you start to realize that she is suffering from trauma. And that helps you piece together what is what, both in terms of this really captivating plot and in terms of Sally's complex character. Plot-wise, this is one of the best books I've read all year, but plotty books very rarely have such vivid characters. Not just Sally, but certain other characters who I'm avoiding mentioning. Dark, twisted, sad, moving, and much funnier than a book on this topic has any right to be. I really recommend this novel to fans of Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Maame by Jessica George. Medie is a British Ghanese woman who has spent most of her adult life looking after her sick father and living with him. Now that her mother is back from Ghana at 25, she is taking the chance to live her life. Moving out, changing jobs, making new friends, dating. This is a textbook coming-of-age novel done well, and those novels are always going to be popular. The lesson Medie needs to learn, the central thing in this novel, is that she isn't putting herself first, and when she does, she is considered selfish for it. There are so many other themes here: sex, mental health, racism, identity, employment. I really like how they all intersect when possible. For example, Medie sees a therapist and she's really hesitant to go, but when her therapist is a British Ghanese woman, she instantly feels better. That's Medie's way of saying that she has one foot in both camps. She kind of feels both British and Ghanese, and she feels not having to explain the weight of that experience and identity to her therapist is going to result in better care. And this demonstrates this hurdle that she feels for getting her treatment, which I guess is the reality of being a minority population, that you won't see yourself or the people like you in those positions of care. Almost every theme or aspect of Medie's life has multiple examples, and this is a technique I love. Discussion of her themes by showing contrast. Another thing that I love that this book does amazingly is that Medie does some things that are a little bit silly or naive. And I know a lot of people find that exasperating. I don't, but I know that's a common complaint. Because this book has been told from the point of view of Medie, we see her thoughts and her insights, and a lot of the things are only silly or naive in hindsight. We only think that was silly when we get further information. As the reader, I learnt at a similar pace to Medie, so I could never judge her for being naive. This book is getting compared a lot to Queenie, which I think is a very fair comparison. I think Maame has an easier to like protagonist, while I think Candice Carthy Williams is an extremely talented author. I think Jessica George is better. Chain Gang All-Stars, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is another one of these books that has rightfully been super popular, but maybe hasn't been as well received by everybody because it blends genres and has been difficult to market. This is a dystopian world where prisoners are given the chance to win their freedom through televised blood sports. They're much more likely to die, but they could win their freedom. I say this whenever I review a dystopian novel, but every dystopian book is commenting on the real world. And this book is not being subtle. It is talking about the current prison system in the US. Although, as I said when I reviewed this book, that doesn't mean it isn't relevant to other countries. While the US does have some horrifying stats and example, elements of my own country, Australia, are worse than the US. And I think every country will at least share some elements with the US prison system. The allegory that is being built here is brilliant. Yeah, everything is turned up to 11 and the world is very spectacular, but the arguments used to justify the prison system to the general public, the media, the shareholders, the employees, they're the same arguments that are used to justify this blood sport. People die horribly violent deaths in our prison system for the profit of the owners. Deaths that are completely avoidable, and we ignore that. This book has included so many elements of the prison system too. How it radicalizes, how it treats disabled people, the food, the sexualization of prisoners, the human needs they have, the fact that innocent people go to jail all the time, and the fact that violent people still live in the real world, how protesters and activists are largely ignored and considered an embarrassment or an annoyance by these organizations. The world that has been built and the discussion and the themes and their relevance to the real world is so well done. If you like the Hunger Games but want something more adult, this one is for you. A book I would recommend for buddy reading or book clubs, as long as you're not reading it with a conservative who is likely to support the prison system. Nightbloom by Peace Adzomendi. This is a story in 3 parts, and it's about cousins Akaphora and Celesi. The two are really close friends, and Akaphora's family takes Celesi in and looks after her as a teenager. Now, many years later, she is acting very ungratefully. The first part of the story we see from Akaphora's point of view, and then we get almost exactly the same story from Celesi's point of view. Although as these stories end up, they do diverge and both women are left in very different places. This is brilliantly done, witnessing the shift in perspective and how information is hidden or presented to each of the women and how people are manipulated. At the end of parts 1 and 2, the two women are in such different places, but part 3 brings them back together and resolves everything. I love how Peace Adzomendi has used this structure perfectly in my mind, although it does make it impossible to talk about some of the things in this novel without spoiling it. Ultimately, this is a story about a friendship that has been damaged and is at the point where both women must decide if they repair the friendship and move forward or if they let it break. However, through that, there are so many themes, and the insight into life in Ghana is amazing. We're talking about the stratification of their society, bribery, political corruption, the desire to leave Ghana for the US or Europe, the role of women, marriage, babies, women being the breadwinner and the stigma attached to that, violence, assault, sexual assault, bullying, the school system, nepotism, and even things like housemaids are all dissected in this really subtly complex novel. A truly under-discussed, amazing novel. Peace Adzomendi is an absolute credit to Ghanese literature at the moment and one of the absolute best authors in Africa right now. If you liked The Girl with the Louding Voice, Nightbloom is a fantastic choice for you, although the writing is much more conventional in Nightbloom. Talking at Night, Claire Daverley. Rosie and Will meet at high school when Will is tutoring Rosie's brother in maths. The two are in many ways the complete opposite. Will has a bad boy reputation. Rosie does what is expected to her. Will lives with his gran after his mother up and left. Rosie has rich and supporting parents. Despite his good grades, Will doesn't want to go to uni. Rosie will be going to uni. Will's grandmother loves Rosie. Rosie's parents hate Will. Will, in the very core of his being, doesn't care what people think of him. And Rosie can't help but to people please and do what is expected of her. So when Will asks Rosie out before exams, she doesn't know what to do. And eventually Will asks if he can wait for Rosie, and Rosie says yes. This is a romance that tackles grief, identity, our place in the world, longing, class, friendship, cancer, alcoholism, mental health, being a twin, and the question of when do you wait and when do you move on are all major themes. This was one of my last reads of 2023 and I've not spoken about it on my channel yet. It is such a good book. There is simplicity and complexity and beauty to this writing, and it reminds me of Normal People, which is apt because we have this swaying love stories of best friends and a special connection and that one person who really gets you in a different way to anybody else. But there's also themes of class divide and higher learning. Really, this is the one book that I think it is fair to compare to Sally Rooney without it being a lazy comparison that everybody is making. Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. This is a love story / coming of age novel about Lucy, who lives in rural Ireland during the early 1990s. She is best friends with Martin and everybody has assumed they will end up together. But Lucy doesn't feel that for Martin. Instead, she wants nothing more but to bask in the attention of her other best friend, Susanna. Lucy must figure out her own sexuality in a world where lesbianism isn't a thing. She must battle the expectations of her family, her schoolmates, her town, and of Martin, while sunbaking with Susanna, who is wearing a bikini that doesn't quite fit properly. She must figure out what her feelings are for her and if Susanna feels them back. This is told from the point of view of Lucy, and I love this choice so much because Susanna comes across as this perfect goddess character. You can deeply feel Lucy's crush on her, yet there are these hints that she's not the character Lucy sees. You can almost imagine if this book was told from the point of view of Martin, him saying, I don't know what Lucy saw in that weird friend of hers. The other thing that this book tackles excellently is shame and the fear of coming out. You can really see how many queer people lived straight passing lives, got married and had children just to fit in. I think if you're a fan of Mrs. S by Kay Patrick, then this is a good one for you. But obviously, I think Sunburn is considerably better. Not that I think Mrs. S is a bad book, but, you know, Sunburn is on my best of 2023 and Mrs. S is not. Wade in the Water by Nyamba Nkrumah. 1980, in a small racially divided town of Mississippi, 11-year-old Ella strikes up a friendship with Miss St. James, a white woman living on the black side of town. This friendship deepens when Ella starts to receive tutoring from Miss St. James. We also have this second timeline in the 60s when we learn about Miss St. James's childhood. This book takes place in the shadow of the Freedom Summer murders, and you can see the effect that this has had on the town and the people, the community-wide human impact of such an event. Ella is popular with several people in the town, but not her mother or her mother's lover, Leroy. This is a really chilling and dark subplot that really acts to confuse and stress Ella out, to traumatize her. Ella wants the townspeople to like Miss St. James, but the townspeople don't trust a white lady living in a black neighborhood. That creates conflict. That's not how things are done here. Ella, who is very intelligent, doesn't know who is on her side or who to trust. I think this is a major theme of the novel, trust and distrust. But also racism, love, class, identity, pride, community, white power, the KKK, and the lingering effects of racism are all central to this novel. I think if you liked To Kill a Mockingbird but wanted to know what it would have been like written by a black woman and had more black characters in it, then this would be a fantastic book to pick up. Burnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. We are starting to get to the pointy end of this video. Burnam Wood is a tribute to Shakespeare, a critique of really everybody involved in the New Zealand environmental industry, a critique of capitalism, journalism, the media, and it all stems from a guerrilla gardening group being approached by a billionaire wishing to provide funding for them. Literary fiction rarely has this sort of high-octane plot, and I think it is nothing short of remarkable that Catton is able to produce such a fast plot with intrigue, mystery, sex, violence, jealousy, desire, ambition, and all of those things that make a plot tick, while she's able to build characters and discuss all of the themes she does. It's masterful. Normally, I would criticize a plot for being this fast. But the reason for this is I feel like a lot of authors place plot speed above things like character development and themes, and that isn't the case for this book. I particularly loved the portrait of this Elon Musk-style billionaire who wanted everybody to think he was an idiot, so acted that way in public so that he was constantly underestimated. When I try to think of what book to compare this to, I had so much trouble. It is a Shakespearean tragedy written in prose about a very modern topic that is socially critical in a completely different way to the Bard. The only book that I can think of that would have similar fans is The Beasting by Paul Murray, but even then, that's not a great comparison. From one book referencing Shakespeare to another. Enter Ghost, Isabelle Hammad. Sonia is a 35-year-old British Palestinian actress living in London who, after the dissolution of her marriage, visits her sister in Tel Aviv, where she meets a local theatre group and agrees to perform in their version of Hamlet, read in Palestinian Arabic. What Hammad does with this is stunningly brilliant. Everything becomes an allegory for the next thing, and it creates this loop. The treatment of Palestinians by the Israeli government or police is on display, but so too is the general racism and distrust between Israelis and Palestinians. The everyday fear Palestinians that are living in Israel have for trying to be visible is demonstrated through things like the Israeli police entering the theatre as the group are performing a rehearsal, and one of the actors directs her part towards the officers in a language they don't speak. And this Shakespeare quote becomes so powerful because not only does it fit the situation perfectly, it captures the rebellious discontent of Palestinians, and the simple act of speaking Arabic in the presence of Israeli police becomes frightening. Hammad is expert at building that tension. There's also this theme of returning home and having to accept that it's changed, which is such an interesting and political idea for this country, and one that I think both sides would be a bit angered at. But ultimately, yes, the world keeps on changing and we can't control where it is now. So we need to accept that, and that doesn't mean that we can't mourn the past and reflect back or to look back on it with fondness. Hammad is also able to capture the diasporic nature of the Palestinian people within this book through the changing identities, values, and priorities of the two sisters. So much of this book is about grief, healing, and moving on. I can't help but to look at Sonia's marriage as a discussion of the Israel-Palestine conflict, but also it's about the personal. Sonia is such a well-constructed character. You want her to be happy. You feel for her confusion when men are interested in her. While I have made a lot about the Israel-Palestine thing, this is also a novel about a woman moving on from a failed marriage. If you like the work of Suzanne Abdulhawa, then Enter Ghost has very similar themes, although I do think there are countless more ways you can enjoy Enter Ghost because it is a bit special. In Memoriam by Alice Winn. Historical fiction about either of the world wars has been done a lot. It's not a time period I'm drawn to reading about simply because I've done that and I want something new. So it is an absolute credit to Alice Winn that she has found new things to say and new ways of saying them, providing new insights into the horrors of World War I. This novel starts in a public school in England and follows Henry Gaunt and Sidney Elwood, two boys who are in love with each other without realising that the other loves them back. Gaunt's family, being part German, ask Gaunt to enlist so that they can avoid anti-German sentiment, and he does, only for Elwood to rush to enlist and join him in fighting. Winn is able to do so many really impressive things, starting the novel in the boarding school, showing us the relationships, the tomfoolery and the cruel bullying within the school, then moving the novel into the realities of war. It's such an excellent way of demonstrating how young these boys were. They're literally playing war one week, being slaughtered and bombed by the Germans the next. These boys were well off and rich. They weren't weren't common soldiers, but the leaders. They were expected to make decisions about the troops. And they're so often criticised for their cruelty now, but Winn is able to demonstrate that they're just teenagers and they don't understand what they're doing. They're not hardened soldiers. They're not making cold, rational decisions, but kids who think it's funny to play indoor cricket. The whole setup of the boarding school, the bullying, the cruelty of high school is transcribed to the army. Winn also captures this cruel and dark sarcasm these soldiers acquire to help them survive mentally. How the soldiers that have seen fighting and death react to the wide-eyed new recruits and their eagerness to see fighting. The consuming darkness and depression that these men see really comes across. And that is what Winn has really added to this genre. I do not think anybody has done that as well. In betwixt all of this is this queer love story, which I think is just a fantastic way of demonstrating that only somebody who has seen this darkness can truly understand somebody else who has experienced it. A lot of these men came back into relationships damaged, and their marriage suffered because husband and wife hadn't gone through the same experience. And I think twisting that into a gay romance is such an effective way of demonstrating this. It also really points out the importance of love and connection to these men. I really don't know how to compare this to another novel, because the reason this is such a good novel is it completely eclipses other World War books. I know that this is getting listed as an LGBT book, but I think there are other books that centre gay relationships better. But there isn't a book out there that captures the destruction of a man's spirit and their future and hope during war better than this book. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. This has to be pretty close to the most popular book on BookTube in the book prize and lit fiction circles in 2023. And I think the reason for that is that Murray has got a killer plot, great characters, nice language, a fantastic setting, a list of themes as long as the Great Wall of China, which are all adequately explored. He's got intrigue, secret, character development, characters with hidden depth, humour, and basically anything he could think of to make a book good, he shovels into this novel and has done with amazing competency. And readers who enjoy good characters very rarely complain that there was also a good plot. Every single reader has got something they can enjoy in this novel. And I know most of us might say we prefer characters to plot, or we like nice writing, or whatever our thing is, but most of us are really all-rounders and we like all the things. And so how can we not adore this book? If you have been so unfortunate as to not know about this novel, this is a 500-page family saga followed by 150 pages of a very literary thriller, following a family of 4 living in a rural Irish town: adolescent PJ, teenage Cass, Imelda, and Dickie. Dickie owns a car business he inherited from his father, but after years of work it is slowly going under, and the recession is only part of the reason. Dickie just doesn't seem to care, spending all of his time with his newfound friend building a doomsday bunker. Cass is coming to the end of high school and thinking about moving to Dublin to study. She is discovering her sexuality and binge drinking. PJ is often online, feeling unseen by the rest of his family. He's planning on running away. Imelda is the best character. Murray gives each character a section of the book. Actually, he gives each of them 2. But he starts with the children and then jumps back in time with Imelda to when she is Cassandra's age. And we really learn where she comes from. And suddenly this cold, standoffish woman doesn't just make complete sense, but she has this spark behind her eyes. She's not somebody you want to mess with. She's a woman with a complex past that I don't want to spoil for you, because there is so much joy in letting it unfold for you on the page. There are so many themes Murray discusses through this: legacy, identity, poverty, providence, grief, loss, education, capitalism, being LGBT, being closeted, domestic abuse, the links between business and criminality, sports stardom, alcoholism, the future we see, dealing with an abusive father, environmentalism, leaving home, the internet, predatory behaviour, exploitation, spiritualism, class, the lasting effect of trauma, sexual violence, bullying, forgiveness, family, friendship, and the beautiful and the brutal aspects of human existence. There is so much in this novel. One of the things I think Murray is brilliant at is the change of perspective, giving us more information, adding depth to the themes, the plots, and the characters all in one go. It is so impressive how a section about Cass can give us insight into PJ at the same time as building Cass. The beginning of this novel really overhangs the rest of the book. In the next town over, a man has killed his family. The ending of this novel has caused some division. Intellectually, I think that it's perfect. However, emotionally, I hope somebody introduces Paul Murray to a medieval torture device until he agrees to resolve the ending of the book. I want to compare this book to one of the best books I have ever read because it's certainly of that class, and that is East of Eden. Both of these books are quite thrilling and exciting in places. Both are family sagas. Both have more themes than any one person can possibly name in a review, and both do the themes expertly. I think it sums up this year that not only did I have 7 Irish authors on the list, but that my top 2 books are written by Irish authors. How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. I read this as part of my reading the book a long list video, and when I finished it, I just wanted to read it again, and I forced myself to wait until I'd finished the long list. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if it would stand up to a reread, and it really did. I have never done that with another book before. This book is the perfect emotionally curated experience. The novel is centered on Jamie, a young boy who is very logical, very intelligent, but who doesn't fit in, who isn't a social butterfly, and who calls the kids in his class Boy 1, Boy 2, Boy 3, and so on. Considering they bully him is the perfect passive-aggressive reaction. I know it's not what Jamie's intention is, but as the reader, I found this so satisfying and so joyful. Jamie's mother, Noelle, died in childbirth, and Jamie really doesn't have a lot about her to remember. But one thing he has is an old VHS tape of her at a swimming meet, and he wants to build a perpetual motion machine to help connect him to her. Jamie meets and befriends Tess and Taig, 2 teachers at his school. Taig is a woodwork teacher and convinces Jamie to build a boat with him. But all 3 are outsiders in the town. Jamie because he is a bit weird. Tess is going through marriage difficulties and a potential separation, and Taig is the textbook outsider, the mysterious loner. All these characters have lost parents in their childhood, and they build a small community around them, much to the chagrin of the headmaster, Father Fawkes, who rules the school like a tyrant. This allows Feeney to explore toxic masculinity, the pressure to conform, the importance of being yourself, of discovering who you are. All 3 major characters are going through that in their life. The father-son relationship between Jamie and Eon is lovely too. The stress that Eon is under, how difficult things are for him, but also his love for Jamie is just first class. I just love that relationship. It's heartwarming. But I feel like discussing the themes, the plot, and the characters in this novel don't do it justice. They are all fantastically done, but this novel is so good because of the emotions you feel. The characters are so easy to love, support, and empathize with. This novel is like a warm cuddle from a soft giant in a large knitted jumper. Also, it's really funny in places. Jamie is hilarious for the way he sees the world with his no-nonsense insight and analysis. His description of Jordan Peterson was hilarious, but it's the type of humour that only works in the novel once the characters are built. This novel has really divided opinion, but when you look at the impressive list of authors praising it, Douglas Stewart, Margaret Atwood, Marion Keane, Roddy Doyle, Nisha Doolan, Kevin Barry, Sinead Gleeson, Nicole Flattery, Lisa McInerney, and Claire Louise Bennett, that's not an accident. This book is truly special and does what it is trying to do, probably to an even higher standard than Feeney was aiming for. But what she is trying to do is not for everybody. For the life of me, I can't figure out why everybody doesn't love this book, because for me, this is perfection. It's funny, sad, heartwarming. It's about the underdog. It's thought-provoking, emotional, and it is the most beautiful book I have ever read. This is one of the very few books I could see myself memorizing, knowing every aspect and line of it, and still rereading it and still loving it. I cannot name anything else like it. A unique masterpiece. If you are interested in the very best new release literature of 2024, please make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I guarantee I'll keep you apprised. Make sure you like this video and let me know your favourite book of 2023 in the comments section. Bye bye.